Deadlock is in a weird spot right now. It is dominated by high burst characters. Mina, love bites you, rakes you, you're dead. Pocket, presses the affliction button. Calico, Holiday, Paradox, boom boom boom, you're dead. But what if I told you there's a build in Deadlock that counters the entire meta in the weirdest way possible? Tank Wraith? Is the script correct? Wraith is a super squishy character on base and she needs a lot of spirit and gun items to start dealing damage. So how the hell do I build all green items on her and roll Eternus lobbies with it? Are green items just broken, and what can you do on any character in the game to counter the meta and win more games right now? That and much more in this video. I love providing educational content and it really means a lot to me that it resonates with so many people. And with the Deadlock Academy, we are gonna provide the best content on the internet for coaching in Deadlock, period. I offer classes every week to help you climb in no time, and we also have many more courses by hand-picked pro players and pro coaches. And there is really no better people I could think of to help you teach the game to make you a better player. We also do weekly coach scrims where you jump in to improve while just playing the game. Right now there's a 30-day free trial. Just try it out, see how it goes, and I think the results will speak for themselves. What's up, friends, and welcome to the new meta, Green Wraith. Why is Wraith so strong right now? Why is Green Wraith in specific so strong, and what can you take away from this video to also help you climb on any other character in the game? There's going to be some principles we'll talk about here that are just really strong in the current patch. So, to give you a short summary before we even start with the build, the patch right now is what we call a deathball meta. What deathball means is one team fights the other team in a big 6v6, 5v5 or 4v4 for most of the game. Why is the meta happening? TLDR, jungle is a lot weaker than before. Jungle camps take a lot longer to clear, especially for spirit characters, right? They do more damage to you, and they don't give you as much gold compared to lane creeps. Lane creeps just got a flat out 10% increase per creep, so they're even stronger than before. Jungle got a 15% increase in soul value, but also a massive HP increase, more resistances against spirit, and also they do more damage, okay? Which means for most of the game, people are encouraged to fight because it's just the best way to gain money. But if you know anything about Wraith or other hard carries, before we have a lot of money, we're usually pretty weak in the early game. Now there's one good thing about this patch for carries. They actually got a lot stronger early because every character got stronger early, right? If you itemize correctly and you use the new 4.8k damage threshold correctly, you will do a lot more damage early on. That's the first thing I want to talk about. Another thing that really encourages the deathball meta is the fact that walkers don't die anymore, right? They're incredibly tanky. A lot of the time you can let the enemy wave crash into your walker and it won't really die. That is why your games probably feel like everyone is sitting around middle, blue, and fighting the entire game. Because it's like the best thing to do to gain money. And let's say in general, how does a carry actually benefit from all these changes? Lane creeps give more money, boxes and gold statues are better because they are the same as before, right? They don't take your health and they don't give you the same amount of money. And sinners are also stronger compared to jungle, at least, right? Like sinners got the 15% gold increase as well, or souls increase. They also do more damage to you, but will circumvent that by just buying healing items, a lot of them. And that's one of the reasons we're going green, but not the main reason. Wraith in this patch got a change, a quite massive change. The cooldown on Project Mind got reduced by 8 seconds, or it was 10 actually, right? So it's a massive cooldown decrease, which means this is going to be the ability we level up first or max out first. In lane, we still start with twin cards. This is always going to be standard just so we do damage and can like actually do some damage in lane. I max out cards. I get 1 point in telekinesis just to have a lower cooldown in between, and then I max out teleport. And at that point, we have a 14-second teleport, which means this is the very first meta in Deadlock ever where you are encouraged to use a Project Mind to teleport in aggressively. So you can start the fight with it because it gives you a barrier that scales with your spirit, actually has really good scaling with your spirit. So you can teleport into a fight and start off with like 500, 600, in the late game 800 extra HP because the barrier scales. And then by the time you want to disengage and get out, you usually have the cooldown ready, right? Because it's only 14 seconds, so it's really small. And I think it's a no-brainer to level this up first. It's just the best ability on Wraith right now to level up max. Some people still level up cards, but again, like, yes, 50% faster charge on cards and the slow is nice, but it's just not as powerful as being able to get health twice. Once going in and once going out. You can also use Project Mind to farm. Okay, it's actually a tech I do a lot on stream and people are like, why are you doing this? Where I sit in the Sinners room And Sinners do a lot of damage to you now, right? Like it's 80 per hit, so with 4 hits per Sinner that deal damage to you, that is a total of 320 damage taken, right? And like this took like half my HP. The last hit, by the way, doesn't take any HP from you. But what you can do is, you can actually teleport in place and then instantly start hitting. And what's gonna happen is it's gonna take your shield instead of your health, which is obviously really nice, right? So you're gonna reduce the damage every time you hit a Sinner by like 180, because it's gonna last for at least 3 punches. But let's get into the build in specific. The laning stage is really not much different than any other Wraith build, right? We go monster rounds to shove creep waves faster. We go healing right. This item is crazy right now. Again, like health is harder to come by. Fights last so long that you just get massive value using this even in the mid game, farming Sinners. And a lot of people don't know this. It gives you sprint speed. So even if you're full HP, you can proc this to get around the map faster. And that's going to be another thing with this build, where a lot of the time when we have nothing to do, we're gonna farm boxes. So we can use this during box runs to regen and have enough sprint speed, movement speed, to actually just slide through them without even like using a dash, okay? So that's why we go for healing right, and then we go weapon shielding. Always get this question, why weapon shielding now instead of spirit shielding? The simple reason is weapon shielding procs a lot easier in almost every lane. The damage threshold for when the shield deploys is 150, whereas on spirit shielding it's 225. Okay, so usually it procs faster in the fight. In very rare exceptions, when the enemy has like 2 full spirit nukers and they don't shoot their gun at all, you can still go for spirit shielding. But we're going for weapon shielding, and then we're going for the classic quick reload, right? This is a no-brainer. And then in this build, the stat that I'm maxing to 4.8k first is health, actually. Because we like health, we like running around, and we really want the extra health and extra regen to start farming Sinners and staying alive. A big misconception or a misunderstanding on Wraith is the weakest part of Wraith is the early laning stage and the mid game, right? The early mid game. That's when Wraith is weakest. So at that point is the point where we want to avoid fighting as much as possible, and we want to farm. And we want to, obviously, if we want to farm, because Sinners take a lot of damage from us, and we're, you know, scared of the enemy killing us, health helps us stay alive here, right? So with the shielding, that it will help us in lane, and then enduring speed and regen, we will really not die. And at 7.2k, we're actually looking quite healthy in terms of health. Like I'm at 1600 health on Wraith, and that's a really high amount early on in the game, okay? The laning stage played just as normal. By the way, if you have not heard me talk about the weapon or the investment stats and the investment stats, I made a full video breakdown on why these are so strong, all 3 of them, and how to use them in any of your builds. So check that out. That's the video that came out last. If you want more insight, I do coaching every week in the Gosu Academy. It's an academy I've built with Piggy, Ranger, and Midnight, all really talented Deadlock players, and we do coaching. We already have over 300 members now. It's kind of crazy how many people have joined, and the link is also going to be below. There's a free 1-month trial if you want to try it out. Check it out. It's probably the best coaching service we have for Deadlock on the market. But back to the video. Okay, so we play the lane normally. We farm creeps, right? We try to stay alive. Wraith is still not the greatest in the lane, but she got better because the base damage of Wraith is actually quite okay now with the gun, and Wraith is really good at using a gun early, so she's quite solid in lane. And then at 8 minutes, we really want to make sure to farm the first set of Sinners. Once the laning stage ends, what's going to happen in this meta is people will perma-fight. And you want to avoid fighting until you get to at least Surge of Power, Fleetfoot, and Tesla. And at this point, you're actually quite strong in fights, a lot stronger than Wraith used to be. Once you have all the investments up to 4.8k, right, your cards actually do quite a good amount of damage, 200 damage per card, right? We have really good damage on weapons with the 49 extra weapon damage, and of course we have Tesla, tried and tested. But all we're doing until then is hitting Sinners and farming lane. And the thing that makes this build really amazing is the movement speed you get, okay? Once you have something like Fleetfoot and you have healing right still active, you have an insane amount of speed, which allows you to get around the map really fast. So you can rotate from lane to lane and push out the lane pretty deep into enemy territory, which means you will have a lot of map control, because you'll be like the fastest character in the game to push multiple lanes. And because you can also use the teleport at this point, which is going to be max at this point, to teleport around, you will be very safe with it too. You can use the teleport offensively to get from lane to lane, right? Shove the first creep wave, teleport over, hit a sinner on the way, hit some boxes along the way, and then just shove out waves. And the number one thing you need to do with this build is play very aggressive. What this build is very good at is living and surviving and pushing waves. You can push the waves very deep into enemy territory, and if you have your TP spots correct, if you know your outs of like high ground, and there's always high ground on the map, right? If you know good TP spots, you will live almost every situation. Because again, the enemy is gonna have a hard time. Catching up to you because you're so fast. A lot of the time you just run away, especially once your weapon shielding procs, you also get even more movement speed, okay? So they're gonna have a really hard time bursting you down, and then you'll have a TP, and even after the TP, sometimes people keep on chasing, but because you are so fast, in a lot of fights, or in a lot of chases, I have like 3-4 people running after me for like 40 seconds, I'm not kidding you, and I use TP multiple times and get out, and the enemy ends up committing so much to me that they either lose someone because my team shows up and backstabs them, right? Or they lose an objective around the map because everyone is focused on me. Or at the very best or at the very worst, you end up dying in the end, but you bought a lot of time for your team to do other things on the map, and the enemy just wasted a lot of time chasing you where they could have spent that time shoving creep waves, right? So it's still incredibly essential in this meta to shove creep waves, and this is the best build in the game to shove waves with, okay? You can ignore the enemy. Sometimes I'll walk to a lane where an enemy is right there on the lane, and I just shoot the creeps while the enemy is shooting me, and then I just teleport out, and I just shove the wave while the enemy wasted their time shooting me, and then I regen back, okay? Which, regening back, I talked about this in the other video too. Items like Fortitude and Veilwalker are really strong. You can run either or here. I like Fortitude right now because it gives me more constant movement speed and also regen. The reason I didn't like this item last patch is, last patch on Wraith, I farmed a lot of jungle, right? And if jungle camps damage you, Fortitude will not heal you, okay? It will go back on cooldown, and then you will have to wait 13 seconds, and then the healing is gonna kick back in. But because lane creeps does not interrupt Fortitude, and boxes don't interrupt Fortitude, a lot of the time when you're low, you wait until Fortitude kicks in, right? You just shove out a wave, where it will keep on healing, and then if you're still low at this point, right, you will just run around a bit more and farm some boxes, and during all that time you will regen back, okay? And you're still getting value, whereas before you wouldn't get that value because you had to hit jungle camps. So just in general, rule number 1 is waves, rule number 2 sinners on your and the enemy side of the map. If you can steal enemy sinners, it's even better. And rule number 3, boxes. Rule number 4, ignore jungle camps. Almost completely until you get like way down the line to Mercurial Magnum, okay? Which is like later. Then you start doing a lot of damage, but early on with this build, all you want to do is farm and get to the stage in the game where Wraith is strongest, which is like the late mid game and the late game, where the longer the game goes, the better you become. And really that's how I approach every game I play on this character. I'm like, as long as the game goes longer and I keep up in farm, even if it's even money, I will win. Because another thing with this build is you accumulate so many gold statue buffs with this, because you hit so many sinners and you hit so many boxes, it adds up over time. It's like a crazy amount, right? You might think I'm not getting a lot, but the more I get, the better. And Wraith is the character in the game that benefits from gold statues the most, because every single stat that are in the gold statues help Wraith, because she's a hybrid character, right? Gun damage helps us, fire rate helps us, cooldown reduction helps us, health helps us, weapon ammo helps us, and spirit power helps us massively, right? Which, by the way, Wraith's sprint speed scales with spirit power. So every time you get one of those gold statues and you get a bit of spirit, you become faster on the map. At this point, you're like a race car, and you can literally get from lane to lane like basically instantly, and you can chase people for free, you can run away from people for free, nobody will ever catch you. You're the fastest character in the game, and you're the fastest character in the game to farm boxes. This used to be Calico until they nerfed the cat to now where you have to melee when you're in cat form, but on Wraith I can do this, right? I have the movement speed where I can just run around, soak up everything on the map. We don't fight until we get Surge and Tesla. At this point, we're still kind of weak in fights. We're still like a late game carry, right? So we're still kind of weak in fights. But when this build starts becoming really strong is once we add Siphon and Toxic. And these are not items that are always spot on Wraith. A lot of the time, usually people would do more damage first, right? And people always ask me, why do you run these items early-ish in this build? For the simple reason that this is really a tanky build, right? You have a lot of tankiness early, you have a lot of extra HP with weapon shielding, you have a lot of extra HP with fortitude, and once you get to that threshold, once you get to Siphon and Toxic, and you teleport in, right, suddenly I'm on like 4,000 effective HP, which means I can fight for a long time. And the longer you can fight, or the longer you can stay in a fight, the stronger both Siphon and Toxic bullets become, because they both add up over time, right? Toxic bullets does percentage over time, and Siphon, as long as you are able to shoot, you will always gain HP and the enemy will always lose HP. So the longer the fight goes, the better for you. And sometimes I really have fights where I start out with like 3000 HP and I end the fight with 5000. I'm not even kidding. It's like a crazy amount because you can just sustain for so long, right? And at this point, you start to become the server admin. You start to run around and just kill everyone. And then everything else we do after that is just to add more damage and more survivability. Debuff remover is like a must right now in the current meta, and also kind of a must in this build. Because the one thing that really rolls this build over is if they tether you, like, or silence you, because then you can't use teleport, slowing hex, etc., right? So you need debuff remover in those situations. The enemy will almost always eventually realize, wait, we can't kill this guy, let's buy slowing hexes, or focus lens, right, is really popular right now. If that happens, you immediately debuff remove, and then you teleport out and you get out, right? So this is like your safety backup to where you really don't die. That's why it's core in this build and not situational. And then after, we finally go for Mercurial, right? It's an upgrade. At this point, we are as tanky as we want to, or well, we'll add more tankiness later, but we're really tanky. And at this point, we really want to start ramping up the damage. And again, up until this point, in most games, in Eternal 6, I don't farm a single creep camp. I get all my money from waves, and then sinners and gold statues. And it works, okay? You can still show up in fights, and you can still help your team. But you are not an AFK farmer, and that's the good part about this, right? You're not in your jungle holding your team back and your team has to fight 5v6. While your team is fighting, you're pushing out all the waves. And yes, you won't be able to kill walkers as fast in the current meta, right? Like, in fact, like, until 20 minutes I tried to avoid even trying to shoot a walker because they're so tanky. But you will end up with your creep waves at the enemy walker a lot, which means if the enemy doesn't clear those waves, they will lose the money from those waves, giving your team more and more of a lead, right? Like, so map control is still essential, even though killing walkers is not super essential, at least early on in the game, okay? At this point, you have enough damage to kill anyone. So at this point, all we do is like we look for utility upgrades that help us survive. Right now, there's a lot of bullet damage going on. So a lot of the time, I end up buying escalating resilience. It's a no-brainer on this character just to make us more tanky, right? Gives us a 30% basically bullet resist at all times. And then capacitor is an upgrade for free. It's not as good as it used to be, but it's still like a major shutdown tool, right? If the enemy doesn't have a debuff remover, you will still be able to kill them because they won't be able to move, right? They won't be able to use their movement-based abilities. So it's still a great late game-ish buy to upgrade from Tesla because it's that good. And then I go for Leech. And at this point, you really can't die anymore. As long as you keep on shooting, you will heal all the health back. A lot of the time I get like kind of low, and then another enemy fights me, and then I shoot them for a second and I'm back to full HP. That's how crazy this build is. And if the enemy is running a lot of spirit damage, which is still happening a lot, I do buy spirit resilience. Which, by the way, it should be like, it's like the #1 situational item I buy. I don't buy it every game, because in some games there's mostly gun damage, but if the enemy has spirit damage, at this point you really do want to buy, usually I do it before Leech, you really do want to buy spirit resilience. And then at Leech, usually the game is over, right? At that point the game is over. At 40k it's over. I know in lower ranks the games last longer, but do not worry, the build only becomes stronger, right? Like, you can only go up from here, because then like you can get like massive luxury upgrades like Transcendent cooldown, even more damage with Spell Slinger. At this point we have so much, you know, we have to start selling 3Ks, but you can only go up. Wraith really has infinite scaling into the late game, and she's like the strongest late game carry in the game, other than Warden, I want to say, right now. And yeah, you do 5 million damage at this point, and you debuff them, and you reload instantly, right? So it's really... this build has everything you need. So how do you use this? In principle, to win on other characters, because I think you can apply a lot of the things that make this build great on other characters as well and win more in this meta. And that really comes down to what I described a lot throughout this video, which is you do want to be ready for teamfights early. So get the 4.8k investments in all 3 categories early. This build does it too, right? I had 16k. I do have 4.8k in every category, so I'm fight ready if I have to. But if you're a farmer and the games last longer and you want to like really, or you have to carry your team 1v6 because you feel like your team doesn't do anything, what do you do if your team keeps on pushing a walker and they keep on dying, right? Which avoid walker fights at all costs right now until you're super far ahead. If that happens, you can use the exact same principle on other characters. Get movement speed, get tankiness, push out waves non-stop. If you push out waves solo, you get an insane amount of money from creeps in the wave, and then farm sinners and farm boxes. Jungle will hold you back. Even if you feel like you're getting money from it, like if it's on the way and it's fast, right, it's late game. But even like, I'll show you real quick, even at like 15k, if I'm like at 15k, it takes me so long to clear even a tier 3. Like this is taking too long, right? It's just taking too long. Even if I level up here, right? It's not worth the time, you know? Why do this if there's a sinner on the map where you can just punch a bunch and just get buffs that give you permanent stats? There is no monetary value to these gold statue buffs, but the way you want to think about it, a friend of mine, Ranger, really smart coach, told me something that is very true. 1 + 4, so if you get a full buff from a sinner, is basically like 400 to 500 souls. That's roughly the equivalent in the stats it gives you, right? The stats are randomized, so some stats might be better or worse than you, but imagine like the best case scenario if you want like a lot of damage, right? If you get 3 spirit times 4, right? 12 spirit. That is an extra spirit for free, right? So you just got like a free 800 item. Now I know these scale and early game it's less, right? So it's 2 spirit, so it would be, if it was 2 spirit times 4, it would be 8 spirit. But the thing with these buffs is they last the entire game and they don't clog up item slots. So they're actually better if you think about it, right? Because you can stack them infinitely, right? So you get stronger and stronger the longer the game goes. Play aggressive in the sense of like, don't be super scared of dying. As if you build tanky, and if you have escape abilities like on Wraith, or if you play like a Warden, right, and you have willpower max, right, if you have this, you can shove a wave aggressively, and then you will have that overshield to get out of the fight, right? If you have fleet foot and that, you will escape. So if you're struggling with this build, the Wraith build in specific, it's because you're trying to fight too early, you're not farming efficiently, or you're not actually getting the full value out of it. And the full value is, again, teleporting at all times, using teleport to absorb damage, right, from sinners or from enemy players, okay? And then shoving out waves aggressively into the enemy side of the map. And that's really all you want to do. And you can use this principle on basically every character in the game right now. It is a teamfight meta. You want to fight a lot, but overall, avoid pushing walkers early. Fight with your team if it's close. If your team is on the other side of the map, push out the waves first and then farm boxes and sinners. Ignore jungle unless you're like really confident you can do it fast. And that's the meta, and that's the build. I genuinely do believe this is like just like better than every other Wraith build right now. I have another version because I know some people like more aggressive playstyles, right? So I do have a version, the hyper carry Wraith, that this is the Wraith I've ran for the longest time, right? It has 283 versions now at this point. I've had this build for a year. You know, obviously changed every time. But the reason I don't run this is in the early game here, which, don't get me wrong, it's still a great build. And that's like every other Wraith build out there. It's still a great build, but it just doesn't provide enough tankiness early to survive, or a lot of the time to survive, the weakest part of Wraith, which is the mid game. You negate the downside of Wraith, which is the weak mid game, because you can't die. And you go straight into the late mid game and then you just win your team the game 1v6. That's it. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And yeah, that's how you play the new Wraith. Until next time, see you friends, bye bye.